Should it come as a surprise to anyone that this show was fantastic and is probably the best wrestling pay per view of the year thus far? This is my AEW Double or Nothing 2026 thoughts video. Uh, if you know how these videos work, you know how it is. But anyway, AEW Double or Nothing was the past weekend, and it won't come to a surprise that to anyone that AEW once again handed us great wrestling, satisfying payoffs to storylines, furthering stories that are still ongoing, and a few twists you probably weren't expecting. So let's not waste any more time because we've got a lot of wrestling to cover here in this video. So let's start with the show. Beginning with the buy-in. So the buy-in saw the usual uh, few matches take place whilst the stadium filled up, starting off with a championship eliminator match between Zayda Steel and Vida Vane against the champs Divine Dominion, which was more about setting up the next challengers than anything else. As after the match, Anna Jay and Tay Mello ran down to fend off the champs after a post-match beatdown. So not really much in this match, just more or less setting up who's going after the women's tag team championships next. Then we got a trios match of the Ops and the Death Riders for a fun match which saw Shibata play the babyface role in Peril, which I wasn't expecting from him, but he did such a good job at, which was good. Before the finish, where alone Anthony Bowens faced off against all three Death Riders before Claudio laid him out with a running uppercut for the win. So yeah, fun match to get everyone warmed up. The last match of the show before the actual pay per view got underway was a huge 10-man tag of Shane Taylor Promotions facing off against Boom and Doom and the Congregation. In what was the same match Boom and Doom always have on their buy-ins, just with added bodies this time. Nothing surprising, but in a bit of a surprise move on AEW's behalf, they did a tie-in sponsor with this match with Vita Coco Water, which came across to me. If it's just me, but it might come across to you as well. They came across more like a WWE move out of their playbook, having a tie-in sponsor for this match, not AEW. Anyway, the Faces won in the end after a Tower of Doom spot, and after the match, Eddie Kingston came down, ran down to the Faces side before the heels could jump them. So that was about it. Then there was one more thing that's worth mentioning that happened across the buy-in, which was the big thing that happened before Double or Nothing started, which was the AEW debut of the hardcore legend Mick Foley, who appeared in 3 segments across the buy-in. So I thought I'd just add them all here together at the end. So the first one, he came out, joined Renee Young in the ring, where he did take a not so subtle jab at WWE, saying that he had fell out of love with wrestling, but AEW helped bring back that love. I wonder why. I mean, did you see what they did with him for like the last couple of years? Remember the brand split and that? It weren't that great. The second segment saw him run down some of the matches on tonight's card, including the show, what would be the show's opener of FTR versus Edge and Christian, with a reference to Foley's own past with the two for fans. this wasn't much, to be honest. It was just a quick rundown thing of what was on the card, but it's what happened in the third and final segment before Double or Nothing went live, which really stood out, with Renee and Mick both back in the ring, giving his thoughts on the main event of the title versus hair match, only for Max MJF to come out after Foley might have insulted him. Max comes out, confronts the hardcore legend on mic. Many fans' dream scenario here, having these two duke it out on the mic, and they do go for it. As after Max dunks on the local sports town like he always does, he calls out Mick for being a loser, as he never really stood tall in a lot of his matches during his career. He was always the one on the mat, laying up, looking at the lights, and that. This led to Mick having a fiery comeback promo back at Max, like the hardcore legend of old, really getting into Max. And this led to Max hitting Foley with a low blow before Darby came out, fended off Max before, as we're going off the air, Mick gives a fired up promo to Darby ahead of the main event. Even though that this whole third segment was really strong and was a solid time for Mick, this could have been a go home episode of Dynamite segment for this. You didn't definitely need it on the buy-in. It worked fine here. I just feel like it could have also been on an episode of Dynamite. Double or Nothing officially began on the main show with FTR versus Christian and Edge for the AEW Tag Team Championships in an I Quit match, and if Edge and Christian lost, they would have to retire as a tag team forever. I honestly think this was the perfect match to kick off the show, as you want to catch the crowd who would be at their white hottest, so having Alter Bridge's Metalingus blaring out whilst Edge is the first to come out to blow off this heated rivalry was a great choice, and I think it was really, and it paid off for him in the end. The match itself saw a hot start of the four getting into a hockey fight before the challengers got the upper hand, before splitting off into pairings, where Christian worked over Dax a bit before introducing the first weapon of the match, which was a bit of barbed wire, where E and C both took it in turns using it against Dax up against a rope, and this kind of stayed the way for a little bit, with E and C keeping the momentum in their hands as they go to the outside. But it wouldn't be long before FTR gained the momentum as they hit a spike pile driver on the announce table to Edge, wiping him out for a while. This gave the champs the upper hand, allowing them to work over Christian, who at one point got his hand stuck in between a cinder block, with them trying to get him to quit, only for Christian, in the only way Christian can say anything nowadays, instead of saying the words "I quit," he spoke in the microphone quite clearly and told them he banged your mum, which got a big pop from the crowd. Instead of saying "I quit," there was a brief hope spot with Christian fighting back. The numbers, though, were a bit too much. Also, Stokely undoes the top turnbuckle, allowing FTR to use it as a weapon against Christian. With now the turnbuckle actually being in play, Christian is able to use it against Dax, choking him. I personally saw this as a reference to one of my favourite matches of all time, John Cena versus Umaga from Royal Rumble '07 in their Last Man Standing match, uh, where famously the match came to a close when Cena choked Umaga out with the top turnbuckle, where famously there was also a lot of, which was a lot bloodier as well. Things though look bad for ENC now, as especially after Edge does come back in, hopefully to even up the odds. But sadly, a shatter machine and interference by Stokely does make it look like it's not ENC's night. But they're not alone, as the returning Beth Phoenix comes down to even the odds, who seemingly gets ruined quite quickly as she gets taken out by FTR, setting up a huge spot as earlier in the match, a table was set up in front of the ramp area, and this was just an obvious setup for what was a flaming table spot in reference to Edge's famous McFoley match against McFoley at WrestleMania 22, where he speared Foley through a flaming table. This time, though, it looked like Cash was going to do it to Beth, but Beth moves out of the way, pulls Stokely in front, and Stokely gets speared through a flaming table, which was really good. This, though, brings us to the finish of the match, where it seems to be all over for ENC as Dax attempts a concerto to Edge, but before that could happen, Beth does save her husband, allowing Christian to lock in the sharpshooter on Dax, before Edge then one-ups that by also locking in a crossface on Dax. Now, this would have been a perfect way to close the match for me. And Dax is trapped in 2 submissions and he quits. Perfect. Right? No, as Edge then grabs his spiked 2x4, sticking it right into Dax's face, to which Dax finally says, "I quit." Meaning your winners, and brand new AEW World Tag Team Champions are Edge and Christian. But you do lose that big moment of Dax fighting and then saying, "I quit," as the 2x4 did cover up his face, so you can't see him struggle and then finally quit. So that's my only nitpick with the match. But that being said, in what was truly an awesome match with a couple of cool callbacks, and was a great way to kick off the show. And yeah, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of them using the 2x4. I think it went a bit too far and it kind of ruined the image of Dax saying "I quit." But that being said, this was still a very awesome match, a great way to kick off the show. Next up was Kazuchika Okada versus Konosuke Takeshita for the AEW International Championship. Despite being on second and having to follow that great chaotic "I Quit" match that opened the show, that had the crowd on the edge of their seat, these two basically went out there after saying, "Here, hold my beer, just watch," and had an incredible match. After months of teasing and knowing this is where we would end up, the two top dogs in the Don Callis family go at it once and for all. The match officially started off with the two going straight into a back and forth segment with neither coming out on top. Yet things didn't stay this way as things spilled to the outside, where Okada did end up gaining the upper hand. We then would get an incredible spot of the two trading moves, beginning with a tombstone attempt by Okada and ending with Okada laying both men out, both himself and Takeshita out, with a rolling lariat, which got a huge reaction by the crowd. Next came one of the best moments in the entire match for me, where Takeshita attempted to hit a blue thunder powerbomb on the apron, only for Okada to reverse it into a rainmaker. Now back on the ring on the outside, Okada looks to completely end the match here. He wants to end Takeshita by hitting a tombstone pile driver on the floor. This is when Don Callis gets up and stops him, because at the end of the day, even though he knows they need to get this out, he doesn't want to end up with two of his guys getting injured. And this, he knows, is a threat to Takeshita's health. That being said, though, Takeshita doesn't care and then hits a brainbuster on Okada, because Okada does stop. And then we do get some tension between Don and Takeshita as they get into each other's faces, teasing and foreshadowing what would come later. It's also around here in the match where both men start showing fatigue. After everything hard-hitting they've given, they're just giving thus far, it's not enough. But with their hatred for each other, that's what keeps them going, as we then get a rainmaker attempt turned into a blue thunder powerbomb, which in turn sets up the finish of the match, which sees Takeshita reverse a rainmaker into one of his own, followed by a drop kick by Okada. But Takeshita just reacts to that with a knee strike to Okada for a 1 count. This was an incredible series of reversals and moves. This then leads to a raging fire on Okada for the win. Your new AEW International Champion, Konosuke Takeshita. But we're not done there, as I mentioned about foreshadowing. As after the match, it looks like we're about to see a beatdown on Takeshita as by the rest of the Don Callis family, looking to turn on him, only for a returning Kyle Fletcher to come down and stand with the new international champion against the family. Has Kyle turned on the Don Callis family? It seems like it, only for as the family leaves the ring, Fletcher somehow, already being a heel, turns heel again, attacking Takeshita, officially kicking him out of the family and setting up what the next feud will be for the International Championship. This was an incredible match and was my favourite match of the whole night. Even though my expectations were already very high, they somehow surpassed them easily, and I definitely recommend you check this match out, please. This then led us to Athena versus Mina Shirakawa in the Owen Hart Tournament quarterfinals match. This wasn't originally scheduled for the show. It was meant to be Alex Windsor versus Willow Nightingale in their quarterfinal match. But on the Go Home episode of Dynamite, it was announced that Nightingale herself was injured and would be out of the whole tournament. Now, on my rundown video for this show, I predicted that match. I had recorded that before seeing the announcement, and it was before Dynamite, so I didn't have much time to re-edit it and change my thoughts. But it was still a smart move, removing, on AEW's part, removing that match and replacing it with this quarterfinal match. Before the match actually got underway, we did get a shot of the Women's Owen Hart Cup, which had the names of past winners on it, including two that aren't on TV. Those names being Britt Baker, whose last appearance I checked on AEW TV was the 13th of November edition of Dynamite back in 2024. So almost 2 years ago. That was her last appearance, which was surprising to see her name on there. But the other name was Mariah May, who's not even in the company anymore, and is on her way making the transition from NXT to SmackDown under her WWE name of Blake Monroe. So I found that a bit awkward that they were showing that, and surprised they actually did. Anyway, the match itself kicked off strong with Shirakawa coming out the gate strong by out wrestling Athena. But that doesn't last for too long, as Athena does gain the upper hand as they spill to the outside. This is where Athena uses the environment to her advantage, including the spot of her hitting a drop kick on Shirakawa into the LED barricade, which glitches out. Back in the ring, saw the two go back and forth, with Shirakawa targeting the left knee of Athena after she tweaked it earlier on the outside. As in a surprise, Shirakawa took a lot of this match, working over Athena, who kept getting out of whatever she dished out, leading to the finish of the match where Athena was able to hit Shirakawa with a jumping tombstone, followed by the O-face for the win. Your winner, Athena, now advancing to the semi-finals in the Owen Hart tournament. This was a solid match as a whole, but I thought it struggled to gain the crowd's interest after the previous two awesome matches we had. Next, we then got Jon Moxley versus Kyle O'Reilly for the AEW Continental Championship in a no time limits match. After having a great feud last year, seeing Kyle tap out Mox, the former world champion, twice in a matter of weeks in the latter half of 2025, here we are in a no time limits match to pay off this feud. And what a way these guys kicked off this match, as the pair had a back and forth, trading holds, getting over the idea that both men, no matter what their normal style of wrestling is, they can match the other. So Mox can match Kyle's hard-hitting kicking and submission-based offense, and Kyle can dish out all of Mox's hardcore brawling style. And that's what happened, as Kyle is able to out wrestle Mox, with Mox getting worked over to begin with as the two fight around ringside, where Kyle does take a page out of Mox's playbook, utilizing your environment to your benefit. Unfortunately, though, Kyle does miss a kick on Mox, instead connecting with the ring post, and just like a shark smelling blood, Moxley zones in on the damaged left leg of Kyle, and inflicts more damage, which in turn leads to Mox then taking a page out of Kyle's playbook, using more submission-based offense against him. Even though he's been worked over and he's now got an injured leg, that doesn't stop Kyle from fighting back and gaining control, getting Mox in the ankle lock, only for Mox to escape by rolling outside the ring, where he needs to psych himself back up, knowing that's the same hold that he already tapped twice to last year, and he needs to get in the right mindset. Can't let Kyle get in his head. We then get a double down where the crowd are split down the middle, both Mox and Kyle. This leads to the finish of the match, coming after Kyle does a beautiful transition, getting out of the sleeper, putting ankle lock back on Mox. But in the end, it's Moxley, though, able to put Kyle down with the ankle lock of his own that he taps out to. It's Kyle this time that has no choice but to tap out. Your winner, and still the AEW Continental Champion, Jon Moxley. This was a fantastic match for me, which paid off the past encounters from last year and delivered a fantastic conclusion to this feud. Even though Kyle didn't walk out as champ, he was given the spotlight in this feud with Mox, given wins over him, which I hope will elevate him up the card. Interestingly, the Death Riders, though, didn't leave the entire stadium. They stayed in the crowd to watch what was next. As next up was Will Ospreay versus Samoa Joe in the Owen Hart Tournament quarterfinal. With the Death Riders watching from the crowd, this match had my approval of being match of the night for me in my rundown, and it did. And even though it didn't turn out to be that, it definitely gave it a great shot, as the match started off super strong as Ospreay lays Joe out immediately with an Oz cutter before Joe even has a chance to get ready and the bell rings. This momentum that Ospreay built carries on as the match goes underway. Unfortunately, though, Joe is able to get his hands on Ospreay and is pissed and ends up catching him on the outside, then from a dive, and then throwing him neck first into the barricade, which everyone knows with his history of neck issues was a bit of a worry for Ospreay. That, though, wasn't enough to keep Ospreay down, as the match becomes more and more even, as Ospreay fights back, attempts his second Oz cutter, but Joe does his walkaway spot to cheers as he does that spot. We then get some close falls by Ospreay after taking Joe's offense, firstly hitting Joe with a Styles Clash in reference to AJ, making you wonder, what if AJ left WWE? We could have gotten Will Ospreay versus AJ Styles at some point this year if AJ wanted to do a whole year before retiring. Anyway, the Styles Clash got a 2 count, followed by a hidden blade for another 2 count, as one wasn't Ospreay's enough for Ospreay, goes for a second one, but Joe reverses it into a power slam. Joe then locks in the coquina clutch. Ospreay does a great job of making you think he's trapped in the clutch, but he's able to reach the bottom rope before his arm, after his arm already dropped twice. This brings us to the finish of the match, where there is a smooth reversal by Ospreay out of a muscle buster, turning it into a flying hidden blade, straight into a cover for Joe to immediately kick out at 1. With no hesitation, Ospreay then straight up nails Joe with a third hidden blade for the win. Your winner, Will Ospreay, now moves into the semi-finals of the Owen Hart Tournament. This was an awesome match and had a great opening and closing moments, just like I hoped it would be. Following that, we got the other Owen Hart quarter-final match of Swerve Strickland versus Bandido. Unlike the other 2 tournament matches on the card, this one actually saw the wrestlers go into the match with a bit of story, as going into the show, Swerve had attacked Bandido on Ring of Honor, attacking his neck, which actually gave this match a good story, because tournament matches, you don't always need story, but this, having one, actually helped the match stand out. Starting off strong with another hockey fight energy between the two, with Bandido gaining the early advantage as the match goes to the outside, as Bandido lays Swerve up on a chair before hitting him with a senton off the apron. But that's not enough to keep the former world champion down, as Swerve nails Bandido with a release German suplex into the turnbuckle. This then brings us to the heat moment of the match, where Swerve targets Bandido's neck neck, which going into the match he'd already injured. But that doesn't stop Bandido from making a hot comeback, fighting through his neck injury, leading to him getting a close 2 count off of a frog splash. Swerve, though, able to counter a 21 plex into a flat line, setting up the spot of the match and spot of the whole night, considering what it is. As Swerve charges at Bandido, Bandido catches him, lifts him up onto his shoulders, and whilst on his shoulders, Swerve just goes, all right, and hits a house call on top of Bandido's shoulders for an impressive visual. Swerve then follows that up with a Swerve stomp off the top turnbuckle for a close 2 count. Now that whole stretch woke up the crowd ahead of the finish, which came when Bandido looked to have the match in his favour as he looks to hit Swerve with a deadlift 21 plex, but unfortunately he can't due to his damaged neck. He then reverses Swerve. This gives Swerve the opening he needs, but Bandido reverses that into another 21 plex, but Swerve turns that into a vertebraker, then a house call for the win. Moving your winner is Swerve Strickland, moving on to the semi-finals, moving us closer to Swerve versus Ospreay in the finals, like I predicted it would be. Anyway, this match was awesome, being close to what I thought it would be. The match, it could be arguably match of the year, and that spot was unbelievable, stood out, and yeah, another solid match on this card. Then we got Tekla versus Hikaru Shida versus Chris Statlander versus Jamie Hayter for the AEW Women's World Championship. Unfortunately, though, I feel like both I and this crowd were ready at this point for the main event, as this match and the next are solid, but coming off the high was of the last couple of matches. You're just ready to see the title versus hair match. I get you've got to bring the crowd down before you bring them back up, and this is not a shout on this match because this was a good match. It just, you were ready for the main event. Now, that isn't such a problem against these 4 women who put on a good performance, and the match really gets underway with the 3 challengers targeting Tekla straight away, taking her out the match briefly. Right. This in turn set up the story of the match of the friendship/partnership of Chris Statlander and Hikaru Shida coming to blows as the 2 double team Hayter before Hayter is able to overcome the 2 to cheers. Yet it was the face-off between Statlander and Hayter that really got the crowd's attention and brought them alive. Going into a back and forth spot of the 4 trading roll-ups, but then Tekla is able to take control off of a crossbody onto everyone on the outside before her and Statlander pick up their feud from the past couple of months. But this all brings us to the finish of the match, where the partnership seemingly comes to blows as Shida hits Statlander with a jumping knee that was intended for Hayter, but she doesn't seem that bothered by it as she is too focused on stopping Hayter winning after hitting a Hayter raid on the champ. Statlander, though, doesn't see it that way. Briefly brawls with Shida, only for Tekla to take full advantage and hit a stomp on Statlander for the win. Your winner and still the AEW Women's World Champion, Tekla, in what was a fast-paced 4-way match. And in our penultimate match of the evening, it's Stadium Stampede, which sees Chris Jericho, the Hurt Syndicate, and the Elite of Kenny Omega, Jack Perry, and Matt and Nick Jackson take on the Demand, the Don Callis family of Mark Davis and Andrade, and the Dogs of Clark Connor and David Finlay. If I'm being honest, as much as I enjoy the chaotic energy that is these Stadium Stampede matches, but I think it all depends on the placement on the card. As having it as the penultimate match the night, I honestly think was the wrong choice here. You may disagree with me on that, which is fair enough. But at this point in time, I was ready for the main event. I wanted to see MJF versus Darby. But that being said, we still have this, which was a chaotic fun that we've come to expect from Stadium Stampede. Before the match got underway, we got pre-taped entrances for both teams. The heels all arriving in the car park beforehand, in cars before heading out, whereas the faces received a pre-taped entrance with freeze-framed name cards, whilst Metallica's Devil's Dance played over the top. The match finally got underway with a massive 10-man hockey fight with the faces coming out on top before all of them get their licking on Ricochet, who becomes a human punching bag. Didn't take long though before the over-the-top spots you've come to expect from these matches began, with arguably the best of them all, which saw Tolalonia locking an abdominal stretch on Omega, but they were able to up the silliness by then having the rest of the heel teams lock hands up the ramp for leverage, which was silly, but it was fun. Only for MVP to get on the apron, break up the link, leading to all of heels falling over like dominoes. This was silly wrestling done well for me, though. Things, though, do become a bit repetitive as there were some spots repeated, mostly dives onto everyone. After a fun spot of Jericho and the Elite hitting 40 punches in the corner, followed by up with a Hurricane Rana, we see everyone breaking off and going everywhere around the stadium, as we see the Syndicate brawl with GOA, leading to a shot of Bobby laying down, only for Leo Rush to poke his head into shot, for anyone who remembers them two as a pair back in 2019. We then got back-to-back great spots. First was the Bucks and the Dogs brawling backstage, where Kurt Connors gets super kicked onto an escalator going up, for him laid out going up on the escalators. Great spot. Followed by secondly by Andrade getting catfished when he's doing his selfie spot with the ladies in the crowd by Luchasaurus in a wig. This was quite fun as well. Silliness, but done right. Only then did things escalate after that, as we then got a food fight segment ripped straight out of WWE in the 2010s. This, for me, is where the silliness went a bit too far. I don't really expect this from AEW. Definitely more something from 2010's WWE. But don't worry, Jack Perry then committed attempted murder of Mark Davis, and I didn't miss that, as Perry actually drives the Jurassic Express straight into a car that Mark Davis was trying to get into. Just, yeah, shocking visual. It was great, but I mean, attempted murder? I mean, the wrestlers really do like trying to kill each other with vehicles, it turns out to be. All of this carnage concluded with the finish of the match, though, seeing all the heels go through tables, leaving Ricochet all alone with the faces in the ring. He takes everyone's finisher except for the Judas elbow, as Bishop Khan once again takes the bullet for his team as he then pushes Ricochet out the ring, out the way. He then eats 7 super kicks all at once before he's put away with the Lion Salt by Jericho for the win. Your winners of this year's Stadium Stampede are the face team of Jericho, the Hurt Syndicate, and the Elite. I thought this was a fun match with creative spots, but did see some moments of repetition and definitely could have been a bit shorter. Unlike most times with these matches, it feels like the end of whatever rivalry is going on that needs this match to conclude it. This just felt like it was a way to continue the Ricochet Jericho feud. It's just how I felt. You may disagree. And in our main event, it's Darby Allin versus MJF for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship in a title versus hair match. Now, we've arrived at the main event, which has everything on the line if you're MJF. Will he walk out with his third AEW World Championship, or will he leave? Let's not waste any time and jump into the match and the closing match of this year's Double or Nothing pay-per-view. There was no question in the crowd. There was no hesitation in the crowd that everyone was behind 100% Darby in this match. They all wanted to see Max bald, and after the how the buy-in ended with Foley hyping up Darby, that carried on into the beginning of the match, which started off as Darby hit 3 straight headlock takeovers on Max for a 2 count, already getting over that iconic image of that headlock takeover from their rivalry, as it would come back later. It didn't take long, though, for Darby to damn near kill himself as he hits a suicide dive to Max, but Darby lands on his upper neck area on the outside. This then is a perfect time to bring up the fantastic story of the match, which sees, unlike on the episode where he lost the championship, where Max was not prepared for Darby, Max has now had weeks of preparation to get ready for Darby in this match. Meanwhile, in those following those weeks, Darby has been defending the championship every week, putting his body through pain, putting his body through damage, and slowly his body is breaking down. Here's the thing. Max is healthy and is prepared for Darby. Darby might be prepared for Max, but is his body going to be able to cope with all the damage it's suffered in this match? Things slow down as Max takes full advantage, targeting the neck area. Targeting the neck area after dodging Darby's attempt of a coffin drop on the apron, hitting a pile driver on the steel steps, getting over that brilliant story they're telling. But does that mean that doesn't mean that they don't tease Max losing here as well, as he does some great selling when he's stuck and trapped in the Scorpion Deathlock. It's almost like Brock Lesnar levels of selling when he's stuck in a submission. We then get a back and forth of pin attempts, trading them between the two, before a great shot of both men completely exhausted, leaning up against the ropes opposite each other, staring daggers into each other, knowing what they need to do to win this match. And this brings us to the end of the match, as Darby goes for a third suicide dive, but this time we see it through the cameraman's point of view, as Max pulls the cameraman in front of him, so Darby just collides with the cameraman. Now, this gives Max the chance to take Darby up to the top of the stage where the barber's chair is, and he tries to cut Darby's hair. This then leads to Darby fighting back, where there's a scram between the two, leading to MJF getting laid out on the table, giving Darby a chance to do something insane. And that is what he does as he climbs up the scaffolding of the set and does a bang bang tribute to Mick Foley, and then hits a coffin drop through Max. And sadly, though, this decision is what costs Darby the match and his title, as this brings us to the finish, with Darby now busted open at the back of his head due to an awkward landing, back in the ring after a close 2 count off a coffin drop. Darby has only one last resort. He puts in the Scorpion Deathlock on Max, but all that damage that he's put himself through for the past couple of weeks, and what he just did, jumping off the stage set through a table, his body gives out, he passes out, and that's the perfect opportunity Max was waiting for to capitalize, and it pays off as MJF wins the whole match and saves his hair after hitting an avalanche tombstone, followed by pinning Darby after a headlock takeover to add insult to injury, with that being how he beat Darby. How he beats Darby here to become your new AEW World Heavyweight Champion. But we're not done there, as afterwards MJF wants to rub salt in the wound, but Kevin Knight runs down to fend Max off, running him away from doing anything else to a defenseless Darby who's been placed on a stretcher. Before the unthinkable happens, when Knight hits a frog splash on Darby, turning heel in the process, bringing the show to a close. This match, well, there's only one way to describe this match. It was great, fantastic story to close out the whole show, but they could have left the Kevin Knight heel turn for Dynamite, personally, because the image of Darby laying out flat and MJF standing tall, saving his hair, was a perfect way to close the show. Conclusion. In conclusion, AEW Double or Nothing 2026 has been described as AEW's crown jewel, the best pay-per-view they've ever done, which seems to be the case every time that they have another new pay-per-view. Somehow they keep outdoing themselves and topping the previous outing. So what did I think? Is it as good as everyone reckons? I honestly think Double or Nothing 2026 is damn near perfect. There was nothing wrong with this show. Everything was a home run, with standouts being, for me, being the International Championship match and the World Heavyweight Championship match. I genuinely don't think there was a single negative across this show. Yet, if I had to nitpick something, it would be the placement of the women's four-way and the Stadium Stampede right before the main event, because you just were ready for that main event. But that being said, that's not a negative. That's just a nitpick on the placement of the card, because the match was still good when you're ready for that main event. I hope you enjoyed this video looking at Double or Nothing 2026. Please check out my past videos and keep an eye out for future ones. Until next time, thank you. Goodbye.